Thank you. So, hi y'all. Welcome to the panel on financial literacy for artists. I'm going to start by introducing myself. My name is Odile Myrtil. I'm a DJ, producer, and organizer. I've been working in music for the last 10 years. And yeah, my intention with setting up this panel is just to start fostering spaces created by and for artists, and that will focus on just present issues in the Montreal creative scene, learn from each other through shared experiences. Personally, everything that I know I've learned from other friends that were freelancing and that were really good at it. Have conversations on topics that can seem at times abstract or taboo, like I come from just a working class family where discussing money was just not in the cards. and just for us to experience a panel in a format that's a bit more human and less academic. So yeah, thank you guys for being here. So I'll introduce my speakers with me, that are with me right now. We have Maylee Keo, pronounce Maylee, thank you, like the month.
Yeah.
Pronounce she, they. Maylee is a 2D illustrator and animator based in Montreal. Having had the opportunity to work on many projects both locally and internationally, she stands out for her colorful creations inspired by nature, amongst other things. It's clear from her creations that she chooses to work on projects that are in line with her values. She doesn't hesitate to defend what's important to her, such as the representation of minorities in today's society, and important causes, which leads her to create touching and striking pieces. So if we could make some noise for Maylee.
Thank you.
And then we have Hey Tam, pronounced Hey/Tam. Farsan, is that how we say your last name?
Farsan, yeah.
Farsan, aka Monsieurmadam. They are a visionary music producer, DJ, and organizer based in Montreal, renowned for their innovative approach to electronic music. Their sets are known for their infectious energy, inviting everyone to connect and share in the moment. As a founder of Afterware Live, an online streaming platform, Monsieurmadam champions live electronic performances and collaborative experiences that elevate the artistry of music. This project serves as a platform for experimentation and connection where artists from diverse backgrounds come together to create immersive sonic journeys. Active in the local scene, Monsieurmadam regularly showcases their work at various events and festivals, gaining recognition for their fresh sound and engaging performances. Make some noise for Monsieurmadam. And last but not least, we have Hakeem Lapointe, pronounced he, they. Also known as, you might need to help me with how to pronounce your artist name.
Amsalison.
Amsalison is a musician, founder of Collective EAF. That's also how we pronounce it.
EAF.
EAF. Thank God you're here. And booking manager at the venue SAT. Operating between the DIY scenes and professional music industry for 6+ years, they retain a desire to bring forward alternative left field experimental practices creatively and professionally within the industry. Let's make some noise for Hakeem. Cool, so the first set of questions that I'm gonna have are gonna be just like general freelancing questions. I have some things that are maybe more specific for one person and other questions that are more general, but feel free to just pop in if you have things to add. So the first question would be, can you talk about your experience with freelancing?
Our first period. Well, when I first started, I was kind of just working on my own solo projects and trying to build a world from them, because at that point, I was more of a reserved person. So the moment that I felt like I could connect to other people through something that felt so personal is when I started to invite other people into those practices and let other people become knowledgeable of what it was that I was doing. But it took a long time before I started to monetize the freelancing. And it was through a lot of like trial and error, and talking to friends and like different community members who were in those positions that were more knowledgeable to get to feel comfortable in what I'm doing now.
I feel like I wouldn't ever describe myself as the real freelancer. I mean, by the nature of things, I would say that making music is always kind of freelance, but I've always tried to mix in like a pretty good work, like professional work and creative like freelancing balance, but never at a point where I've done it like full time. But that's because of my own personal, I don't know, attitudes towards working, where I'm very perfection oriented, so I'll take things super slow. Like currently, I think like the EF endeavor has been on the shelf on and off for like 4 years before I started it, and I'd say that's like maybe the most real freelancing thing I've done. And for music, I've always taken like a more commercial approach because I didn't want to rely on grants. So it's always been like, you know, subject to the nature of the market. So.
And I guess I'm a traditional freelancer because I've been working in like other companies, and either they would put me at the door or it would just close. And I think I tried to be a freelancer in 2015 and it didn't work out. But then I worked in this small startup and then it closed, so I just became a freelancer by default. And sometimes when things work, they work. So I have been on my own since 2016.
Nice. And maybe more for Monsieurmadam and Maylee, when did you guys start treating your passion projects more like a business? Because I just feel like there's this kind of reality of like, you know, you're doing something for fun and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, like, you know, it's like, I need to keep 15% of my money for the taxes and like all these things, you know, that are just like popping up as you're kind of doing more and more gigs.
I guess me, it just became like natural because I mean, I always just follow what I want to do, kind of all my endeavors and stuff. But I think when it got into like seriousness, I guess it's just like when you just kind of see, oh, people are coming for your own style. Like people come for your own individual person and your own individual like work. That's when I feel like you become a real artist or freelancer in the field, because then people know you for more than just like a technicality. You're like more than that. You are what your heart and soul is like sharing to people and what people are looking for.
Or just like early in your career, people usually like ask you to do something like, you know, copy something else. So
Yeah.
I see what you mean, where it's like you're just more known for your aesthetic and like whatever you're doing.
Yeah, because I'm an artist, I'm an illustrator, but I'm also like a 2D animator. So it's like, it's more than just, I'm not just pushing keyframes, I'm also like drawing, and people can see like my lines and the ideas I bring to the table, kind of like y'all in music. Like, I love what you do. I love like when I know it's your set, I'm like, oh yeah, this is Odile that's doing your set, you know? So it's like, I feel like that's what makes an artist really cool. It's just like, what are you bringing as BPMs, or what are you bringing as a set, you know?
Just like a vibe. Like,
Yeah, what
is your
vibe? Yeah, what vibe are you bringing?
Yeah. How about you, Monsieurmadam?
Well, I started off as a music producer, and I still consider myself a music producer, but when I was making music, I started by working with dancers, and I was always aware that I could, there was a transactional aspect to the service, but I had my own hang-ups around that, so I never really considered to be paid, or like that I refused to believe that that was on the table.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would just get paid very like low amounts, and then by procuring those kinds of services more and more, and like starting to establish my own sound, which is what was most important to me, that's when I started kind of making everything match like the results and the quality of the service to the price. But yeah, and then that was the music. I just DJing kind of caught up with that, and it's helped to inform a lot of what I know now about the scene, the industry, and like everybody that constitutes that ecosystem, and like how to price myself as a member of that.
Hakeem, could you maybe talk a bit about the process of, you know, preparing an offer? Because just through your job as a booker, you're doing a lot of that, preparing fees for people, pitching them. So maybe just kind of explaining that process on your side.
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's a long preamble to this, which is the Quebec economy culturally is a bit complicated as of late because, as some of you may know, CALC has been slashed in half in the recent years, and also jury is not peers anymore. So say you apply for a grant or for financing, it's not just like musicians or visual artists that will review your demand, it's going to be all fields.
Which is what it used to be like.
Yeah, exactly. So
past.
before, when you applied for music, it's going to be only music people looking at it. And so I'd say that right now we're stuck in a pretty commercial geared ecosystem, culturally speaking. So unfortunately, a lot of the offers that I have to do through work have to consider a lot of the market outreach of some of the artists. I personally have very niche tastes, and I would love for some people to come over to town, but sometimes the fee that the agent will be asking versus the reality of the city is going to be very different. So there's always like weighing in how much like it balances out, and of course, like, you know, as a passionate individual, you have to make that sacrifice and say, I'm going to lose money at some point, just because I want interesting things to still come here and not be completely dominated by like the value of money, right? So it's going to be a lot of that. Also considerations for you know, lodging, traveling, and stuff like that for internationals. And then for local people, I try to raise the bar a little bit to redefine what the minimum wage is for local musicians, because back when I started, it was what, like $100 a gig.
Still
yeah.
is some places.
Yeah, so I'm trying to raise the bar significantly for people in the local scene for that. But yeah.
But there are also like, you know, budgeting restrictions. Like, you know, sometimes people, let's say you're seeing this hat from the outside and you're just like, well, they should pay me like $3,000. Like, you know, but it's like, you know, I guess, yeah, there is this limitation in terms of budgeting that kind of limits how much money you can offer based on.
Yeah, definitely.
Shows.
There's also the problem of like playing on home field or like out of town. It's way different. For some reason, you know, it's like whenever you play elsewhere, you're always valued like more than.
And you maybe sometimes you have an agent, you have like a whole kind of ecosystem on the artist side that like explains why some people are paid more than others.
Yeah.
Cool. And how do you guys, maybe more for Maylee and Monsieurmadam, how do you guys like receive an offer? Because, you know, I'm just like, from being booked from like different institutions, I just feel like DJ booking is specific, like show booking is specific, you know, I guess for you to like illustrator bookings are specific. So I'm just curious about like, when you guys receive an offer, like what does that look like, you know?
Well, I used to get a lot of my offers via DM, and from time to time, yeah, I still do get offers over DM, but now I make sure to send them to my email because I like to keep a paper trail, but also it's just really just that much more professional.
For sure.
And if it's over DM, it's kind of just that it doesn't
So
feel
it's like a priority.
yeah, it doesn't. I forget to answer my messages for like
It's
days.
overwhelming.
It's very overwhelming. So I make sure to send them over to my email so I can at least classify that, and like if it needs my attention immediately, I can get on my computer because that's what emails are for. But yeah, when I get an email for a booking, like straight up first step, I get an email. I value that a lot more, and I know that they mean business. And then we can keep communicating through that, and then that's kind of
Yeah, I agree that you can really, the way that somebody reaches out to you as a booking, you can kind of, I mean, like, just because I've been doing this for a while, I can tell the level of like organization and like professionalization of the person. You know, if they're like, if it's like a mess, like I'm just like, oh, it might be a mess, you know.
Especially if it's like, because I do get booked by my friends who are other DJs and other organizers, and even them I make sure to tell them, like, if you need to book me, do my email, because we have a conversation that's full of memes and then you want to book me for your set. I'm not going to see that.
For sure.
I totally agree with what you're saying. I think it's like good to separate leisure and fun to serious and professionalism.
Yeah.
But for me, my bookings are like really word to mouth. Like I've been working since like 2012, so I feel like building a community, having that community, like, hey, I know you, you know me, and oh, I don't have time for this, I don't have time for that, let me refer you to this person. Like I feel like if it wasn't for the community, I wouldn't have as much work or as much care also and trust from the people. I feel like it's important also to trust the people you meet and just like take a chance, take a leap. You never know who you're talking to, what will it ever lead to.
For sure. Or where people go. Like I've just recently like got a booking from someone that like I helped them, like they interviewed me for their PhD paper like 5 years ago.
Really?
And now they're doing like a festival, like a huge festival in like Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean. And
Yeah.
like I went and I'm just like, oh, wow, it's just crazy, just the network, and like you never know like what projects people are going to do in the future, and starting these kind of business relationships.
Absolutely. I feel like we have to stay open-minded to just creating and building communities, because I think like we always think about the bigger people and all of this, but like on top of that pyramid, even though if they take a lot of percentage of all of our like money and whatever, the 99% is where it all belongs. Like this is where all the community belongs. And I feel like even just investing time, space, money, whatever, like you were saying, it does build something bigger at some point, because you'll just end up with a bigger network, and together we could like share, like let's say today we're just like a few people, but for me that's like already a lot for building community awareness about like just what we do, you know?
Yeah. So now maybe a little touchy question, but what would you say is your standard rate for like the typical request that you get? So I guess as a DJ you're getting like bar bookings, or like maybe just like bigger gigs, and then you, Maylee, I know you're doing, I don't know, you're still doing murals?
So I do like a lot of different
Yeah, I know you do like murals, VJing, like
animation.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So maybe just like in this context, like maybe more of your muralist and like
Oh well, at the same
like
time,
VJ.
I don't mind talking, because I feel like it all goes in together. I feel like I don't want to gatekeep either on
For
like
sure.
the information, but it's just like for me it's like I've been here for a while, but I can also say like, because the economy, we were talking about like, oh, things are getting slashed, benefits are getting slashed or whatever, you have to know that it's okay to take smaller gigs, because survivalism is key. Don't let yourself thrown off by like either like, oh yeah, but they're not paying me more. So like just find a balance into like, oh, like sure they're paying me less, but I'll give you less. If you're
For
paying
sure.
me more, I'll give you more.
for sure.
Have the control on what you're showing up for the person, because at the end of the day, they don't also have all the control. You have the control. So if I have an illustration work, I could have $500 to $2,000 depending on how much the big budget is, or if you're gonna see it in the metro system or just online. If it comes to mural work, if it's a small mural, is it going to be just $500, or can it be thousands of dollars depending on who's taking care of the production, the material, the money, the people, the helpers. Like if there's more people, if they're taking care of more of the work, then I just take less. It makes sense.
Yeah.
But if they say you have to find the assistants, the paint and everything, then I'll ask for more, because I have to pay for more. So it kind of compensates. So you have to like ping pong all the time on like what makes sense, what not makes sense. Because at the same time in animation, for 30 seconds of work or 1 minute of work, that could be $1,000 to $2,000 per minute you're gonna create, because animation is too long to do.
Sure.
So yeah, depends.
So as they say, you have a triangle where it's fast, cheap, and good, and you can only have two.
Yeah,
of them, you know?
exactly.
How about you, Monsieurmadam?
Well, of course, I agree with you. When I started, I was taking the cheaper gigs, like the $50, $100, $75, $100.
But you're also
booking.
practicing at the same time, so.
Exactly. But after, I'd say, my first year DJing, I started to take into account how many gigs I was doing a month, how many, because I also live out of Montreal, so transport and usually the fact that these clubs like to book me after midnight.
Uber.
Yeah, I have to think of the Uber or the taxi. I like the taxi.
Yeah.
I like the taxi.
Team taxi, local
Team
taxi.
taxi, yeah. I have the contact on my phone. But yeah, the transport, looking for music or like the preparation of the playlist, maybe a little less because I'm always just kind of taking tracks and I have like just a bunch of music that I go through after. But now I've increased my rate, especially because I've also had conversations with other DJs, and one that marked me specifically and that made me want like change my rate after. Yeah, and I forgot my train of thought. But yes, I've.
The DJ you met that was making you change your tariffs, I guess, or inspire you to change
maybe,
your tariffs?
yeah, exactly. To take into account all of these things and like take them actually seriously, because if I get paid less for a gig, like $50 of that is already going to the taxi, so I get left with like a lot less. So I have to account for all of it, and then depending on how long the set is, if it's an hour, if it's 2 hours, debate like for that. But it also really depends on the bookers and who essentially you're working with.
For sure.
Like, getting to DJ is fun, but my little spy senses were making me want to actually talk to the bookers and the club owners and see how they get their money and how much money they're getting.
For sure.
So I can look them in the eye and be like, I know what's going on. They're going to pay me this much.
And Hakeem, maybe if you could like just talk, I know you might have signed an NDA with the SAD or whatever,
I don't mind.
maybe a sliding scale of like what's typical for like, you know, let's say local artist that either doesn't have an agent versus has an agent, you know?
Yeah, so maybe I'm just gonna start by bouncing back on what Maylee and Monsieurmadam have said. It's really funny, I kind of go the opposite way where it's like, if there's a local artist that I see playing too much, I'm less likely to book them, because that's diluted attention in the attention economy, right? So like, if I see like, say you're playing every weekend, I'm gonna be like, well, you know, like what's paying, why would I pay top dollar to have someone that's like kind of like doing like cheap gigs constantly? And so even for myself, like for
Shady.
It's unfortunately how it works, right? And so even for myself, like as an independent artist myself, like it kind of opened my eyes to I should say no to gigs that are not that great anymore, especially if they don't put me under good light. I don't feel like it's a good value, especially if I'm not being paid super well. You know, like the context, TPO is everything. And especially when, you know, like as a booker and I travel to do scouting and stuff like that, and if I see artists kind of under-delivering at performances, even though I might love their albums and stuff like that, like it'll leave a bad impression on me, and then I'm less likely to want to do it. So if you're doing half-ass gigs, like it's always... like it's fun for like depending, you know, like DJing small clubs and just like for like shits and giggles, like it's nice, and for like a small like buffer at the end of the month, like a small like extra 200, 300, 400, it's fine. But it's like as a live musician, I've completely quit DJing and all of that. Like it's just like now the live shows, like I'll limit myself to doing 2 in town a year kind of situation to know, and like I choose a context that I feel like is really appropriate for that, and I, you know, will adjust my fee regarding. But yeah.
And then in terms of like making fees,
Yeah.
you know?
So there's always like the For local specifically, I just like to keep it like, I think my bare minimum is always 300 for an hour, which I think is marginally better than what it used to be, or at least what I was used to getting. And then that's like that's my starting point, and then going from there, it's also like if I see someone's like, you know, like really promoting, or they're really active in scene, or they have like that plus-value, like I'll offer more, or sometimes I'll do it's not exactly door deal or a versus deal, but it's if we hit a certain number of sales, I'll chip in like bonuses pretty generously too, because
I think it's an interesting thing that the SAT does this, because it's kind of like also on the artist side, it's like, yes, there's this big machine that's like doing the promotion or whatever, but there's also a promotional like work that's kind of like sometimes not explicitly said by the person that's booking you, that they're like expecting you to do like a couple like 3 posts and like a couple stories, like, you know?
Yeah, exactly. But that's the kind of thing that I'm like, well, usually I don't require anything out of artists, you know, like I'm paying you to play. That's the thing. And then if ever I want to do the thing where I'm like, oh, you know, like if promotion as well, like, and people come, then you're going to get more. That's where I put in the bonus and stuff like that. Because at the end of the day, you know, like the way we do a budget, and that's not just that, that's everywhere, that's a industry standard, is that your cost should be about 60% of door. Regardless of the show, and if it's like a really risky thing, like say I'm booking fucking Diplo, you know, like I'm like, I know Diplo is gonna sell out, so I can go way higher on the percentage of like door to break even, but like usually for local shows even I have to like kind of aim for that 60% of expenses versus sales, bar notwithstanding, because that's also pretty unreliable depending on the music as well, you know, like ambient shows, historically, people don't drink, you know, like the little ketamine fests don't do well with alcohol, so, you know, but that's how I do it. So bonuses or versus deals, kind of, and just quick note, do the audience know what a door deal or a versus deal is? So start door 0 is like, every sale that you do a door, a percentage or a set amount per ticket will go back to the artist. Or you can do a door like, and you set the amount, so like after $2,000 of sales, like then the artists start getting the bonus pay on top of the guaranteed fee. And a versus deal is usually either a flat fee that you guarantee for the artist, say I'm paying Monsieurmadam $2,000, and then I'm giving them 50% of the revenue after break even, and usually like the versus is because you have to cap, or not cap, but you have to your threshold is the guaranteed fee, and then after you've busted that, then you start giving more. So it's kind of like the bonus thing. So, but I do bonus flat fee for locals instead of doing like the percentage thing, but that's more or less the industry standards.
Interesting.
Can I have a question?
Yeah.
So since you book like DJs, do you also take care of booking VJs?
Yep. Turns out I'm the VJ.
You do a little bit of everything. Well, that's the vibe at the SAT. It's like everyone's just doing a bit of everything.
But at the same time, that's what's special, because sometimes like I would do the VJing and I don't get paid because there's nobody at the door, which is kind of ironic because I'm playing.
You mean where like random?
Like I've been playing around here and
Okay.
there, but I haven't done much.
Okay.
But like since I'm technically not super old or like not super like experienced, like I don't mind using that as a place, as a playground. But I'm just surprised that sometimes like I just get out with nothing when I'm playing 6 hours of animation, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I actually put the mood in the background with the DJ, so it's like.
No, for sure. DJ, I mean, at the SAT, the DJs and the VJs are kind of treated equally, like from.
Yeah, to some degree. Like I would say, like the way we do VJs, if it's not for a dedicated audio video like piece, like an AV piece, because then both of those people are getting paid like artist rates with like the whole like the proper booking fee and everything. But otherwise, the way I treat VJs for like, say a VJ is playing like 3 hours in the night, I'll pay them an hourly rate. That's pretty interesting. But I'll treat them more like as like a really deluxe premium tech person, like a back house person with like, you know, a few hundred an hour.
Because I feel like there hasn't had enough talk about VJ protection or
Well,
just
not
like
just VJ,
pay.
DJs, like everyone who's kind of like a freelance performer. It's like, yeah, it's really not regulated. And just from traveling in Europe, like I've just noticed this very, like it's a lot more organized in Europe in terms of like just that. Like there are systems where you could just declare X amount of hours that you're doing as an artist and like get an allocation. It's just like, yeah, we kind of don't have these systems here.
Like we should almost unionize almost.
We should, but that's like any rich queer like that.
We can't have
the
that.
money.
I just feel like it's weird that there's no like base pay or like a clear base pay.
But that's what like unregulation does. Like
Yeah,
it's
but
like
that's
it's
messed
like
up.
in our housing, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which is unfortunate because like for visual, like more traditional visual art, you have Carfac
Yeah,
that
exactly.
establishes like base rates, and it's kind of like they have a lawyer base that you can use whenever you're getting like screwed, and you can like refer to them, and they'll defend you in court and stuff like that. So it's like they have kind of like that half union with like established rates that I think like music should have as well.
Yeah.
For sure. And what is y'all's perspective on just collaborating on free projects? Because it's like, personally, I'm just like, I want to work with my friends, and I'm like, there isn't money sometimes, but then sometimes I'm just like, okay, if it's gonna be like so much work, like I'm just like, I can't do this for free. Like, you know, like what's the kind of line for you guys? And also in terms of just collaborating and like, how can I say, like getting back to the purity of like art making, you know, where it's just nice to be doing stuff with people and not like talking about money, you know?
Well, for me, if I'm DJing a certain month, I know that I can fund my radio project. And I know that that kind of helps me curate more fun things under that umbrella and like be able to work with other people and compensate them fairly for what it is that they do. I love working with friends and I love doing free projects if it's like a real grassroots level moment where we all know we don't have anything to fund this, but we really want to make it happen and we can visualize how beneficial it would be for our community or I guess the bigger picture. Yeah, get me in. And I've done a lot of those, and even for afterwear, like it is very much a free project, and the team that I've managed to gather around me like believe in that and believe in that vision. So it's fun to surround yourself with people who also have that philosophy and also know that building that base kind of helps to feel less insecure and less daunted by approaching bigger industries for funding because we've all worked on this and we've keep working on this regardless of funds.
Yeah, there's also an aspect of like, you know, like, how can I say, some people go to business school and other people go to the school of life of just, you know, working with people and like knowing, you know, how to deal with kind of just these kind of like, you know, even if it's not a paid project, like sometimes I've learned the most from like a lot of free projects that I've done where I was just like, okay, like, you know, if ever we would have had funding for this, like we can't like spend, you know, let's say, I don't know, just like making music, we can't spend that much money on the production of the music and not think about, you know, the middle part and then the you know, like the marketing of the project after, you know? So just, I feel like free projects are just very good like learning grounds.
Absolutely. I feel like I've done a lot of like community-based projects. I feel like everything you've been saying is what's essential to free projects is just not having someone on top telling you what to do, but also having that playground of just exploring what you want to do, because you have so many like-minded people that's in the industry that are just like overwhelmed by what the industry asks from you. So to be able to be like, you know what, let's just try and settle some rules, try and settle some ideas, and if it works out, then it's great, because I can maybe like I would do the animation, but I know jack shit audio, so having someone that knows how I feel audio-wise is just symbiosis of just like teamwork, and then you never know where it will bring you. Also, like you were saying, like I would suddenly put that short animation I did into like a small quick festival, and then they pick it up. I'm like, well, that's actually cool. Like it's actually like the project actually traveled, you know, or just like where can, let's say I can challenge my ADHD because I have like too many ideas, but I want to do 6,000 ideas at the same time. But having like to be able to be like, well, look, these are what I'm good at, and this is what I'm less good at. Can I find people who can help me in the things I'm bad at, maybe, or just less good at? And then I ended up doing like a project with like almost 80 people or something like that online, and during the pandemic where everybody was like breaking down, just to keep like the community alive, as long as it brings you joy and it's fair for both of each other, until there is, like you say, money, like you say, that comes in, then you can start sharing and care and bringing back the money to the people who participate. But you don't have to like like I don't think everything needs to be capitalized.
For sure, that's how you create community. Like in the other day, you know, like any kind
grassroots
of like
stuff. Like
yeah, exactly. Everything that like that I care about, or like things that I'm interested in, have this like grassroots, you know, starting point.
And then just collaborating with a bunch of people, after a while you get to host that huge event or in that big venue, and the money comes from us and it comes back to us. So.
But also being ready for that pressure, you know, where it's like, hey, you know, when it's like a very big, like you have a very serious or big booking, it's like you also have to be able to deliver like what people are paying you for, you know. So Hakeem, how are fees attributed to openers versus headliners? Just specifically in DJing, there's just, you know, it's very wide, very mysterious, very, you know, like, it's not, as a local artist, I feel like it's a bit, I'm like, oh, the headliner got paid this, like, I'm like, interesting, like.
Yeah, well, there's this misconception that people think they're getting shafted way more than they are, actually. Especially for the type of music I curate, like I'd say headliners are not that far out compared to like openers and locals and stuff like that, especially since I, you know, like I said previously, like I always make the local act like 300 minimum, even for like a half hour. You know, it's a bit like when you professionalize that hobby, when you make music like a real career choice and you're full freelance, right? Then you arm yourself with an agent, sometimes a manager, sometimes a label, and depending on how predatory your label is, there's other considerations, and traveling is also super expensive. So, you know, like part of headlining, I always consider all of that, where it's like you have an agent that's taking 10 to 15%, you have a manager that's taking 10 to 15%, you have a label that, depending on the kind of deal, if you've got an all-around deal where you have to give them part of your merch sales, which is super disgusting. By the way, fuck you AMI and Sony. But like, depending on that kind of dynamic, like I try to compensate that in the booking fee as well. And you know, obviously, like, kind of the thought I was introducing earlier is depending on like the attendance, popularity, you know, like that kind of thing. It's like, of course I'm gonna pay the headliner for what it's worth in terms of, you know, culture capital.
And like how that's gonna convert in like sales, like it's like
exactly.
Still a business, like, and like
and unfortunately that it's very business talk, and like that wounds me deeply as an artist myself, but it's like that kind of duality is harsh sometimes. And usually if my headliner is paid like well and he's greased up or they're greased up, I'm gonna try to do the alleged trickle-down economics and pay a little bit more on the local side as well, whenever sales are doing really well. But yeah, like I try to get Like I'm not gonna have like someone who's paid like 20K headlining and then like an opener local and just be like, oh yeah, you get 300. And like it has to be like somewhat proportional. So.
And I guess you guys have a bit of that flexibility because this app is like an OBNL, so it's a bit less like, you know, let's say, because the situation you just said, like, you know, places like Igloo Fest or like really big festivals, they will like do stuff like that, you know? So yeah, I think that's an interesting thing about, yeah, the SAT, that it is an OBNL and that like there are different kind of cultural institutions that are open and that is not like explicit when you're
non-profit, by the way.
Yeah, non-profit, yeah.
But you know that's not just from the non-profit status. I think that's like a personal philosophy that I've imposed as well in my work, is where it's like I don't want us to become that kind of thing where it's like, oh yes, you're an opener local, immediately you're relegated to that flat fee, you're never gonna make much more. Like we try to be flexible to also like stimulate the local like cultural scene, because at the end of the day, like I'm not working for the money, right? Like as a creator myself, like that's not the kind of like disposition I want to see in this city, especially since COVID hit hard, and I feel like we've lost a massive couple limbs in the DIY scene, and like the with the current like social, political, and economical like pressures that we have, which are like greater than ever, it's really hard to make ends meet. So like it's just a kind of like not radical, but it's like the more progressive philosophy that I'm trying to impose and trying to, you know, convince other bookers in town to adopt.
For sure. So there's the word diversity and inclusion that's been like thrown around a lot in Quebec recently. Have you guys seen any kind of progress in your fields in relationships to that?
Spill a tea, girl.
There has been progress, but it depends where you're looking. I feel for the popular clubs and the popular bars, they have a few regular DJs and performers that come there. And yeah, they're not necessarily of color or black or any kind of other. And I'm seeing a lot of change in that demographic where I'm seeing a lot newer DJs come up and get more notoriety because it reflects their talent, but it's kind of like a double-edged, like, sour moment, because you know that they're not necessarily, that talent means so much for how they are being viewed. If they are good, that matters a lot less than if they are bringing people and if they're making that bar money. But if it's another DJ, I've seen some sets that I'm just like, okay.
No, for sure. There's still the marketability of someone that's still kind of, you know, they're like, yes, we want to put people forward, but then it's like, okay, it's like people that are, you know, how can I say?
Yeah.
Being a person of color performer, you're not thinking about like, how am I going to market myself? Like, you know, just like put myself in a box even more. You're trying to just like get out of those boxes. So.
If you're someone who just started, this is regardless of racial creed or anything. If you're someone who just started and you get offered a set at somewhere like System or somewhere like, I don't know, any like Vino Disco, you're going to be taking that booking, regardless of how much they're paying you. It probably is a little amount, but you're taking that booking because it means something else in the long run, and they know that, and they harp on that, and it's sad sometimes to see people kind of fall into that and like convince themselves that they are taking back power by reclaiming tokenization.
Just as the term itself becomes a tokenization like phenomenon.
And some people like it goes towards the like complete opposite, where they're like against identity politics and don't want to be associated with anything that's like so direct about who they are. And I think there is a stable middle that we can achieve, where people who are talented get the credit and the attention that they deserve, and that there is space for people who have that potential to be able to progress.
Yeah.
And for lineups to change, I mean, and diversify themselves a lot, not just in racial identities, but in sound selections, in different ways to approach a performance. I think there's a few bars that are kind of going that direction now, but maybe DJing isn't all that we need, you know? We could
need
also
more doctors, we need more
plumbers,
like-
we need like live performers that aren't just jazz.
Yeah, and
Although I
just
love
like
jazz.
people that are using CDJ, like, you know, the DJing format, and like
Yeah.
there are so many people that are doing it like in ways that are pushing forward DJing, you know?
Yeah. And it sucks also, again, it doesn't completely suck because I like understand where it's going, but I feel like diversity only kind of really happens in the DJ scene when it is like an international act. It's like there's no talent in the city, you know? Like we'll bring in somebody from other that is very talented, like no shade to them. But there is a bunch of people who are around us who you see get like one booking here and there.
No, there are so many people that are doing stuff here in like any kind of like subculture. Like you will find, it's called Google. Like,
Yeah.
you know, like it's called following,
The
going on
internet.
Instagram and like
Yeah.
you know, going on a little rabbit hole of like finding, you know, there's just every time I meet new DJs or musicians, I'm just like, we never run into each other. You're in this scene that's like completely like, I never heard about like
and then
y'all's
someone,
events and parties and.
and then someone gets called an underground DJ when they're like a pillar of their community.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
For sure. But I think it's also about like people that are in the, how can I say, the decision making, you know, place of like the diversity and inclusion can't just be about like booking me to come do a show. Like it also
Yeah.
has to be about like, can I have a job? Like, you know.
Can I have
You had a question? There's a little mic there if you want.
Yeah, oh,
Are you good?
it's right in front.
Well, I just wanted to add to that because that's a very touchy subject, it's like personal to me. How it's not even just like needing to discover the diversity. It's like a lot of people are aware of that diversity and are aware of those DJs, but they always like book. They have preferential booking, and like it's giving very gatekeepy. And I don't know. It's like, for example, me being a Black queer trans person, a fat person. It's like. They don't get the glamour of like booking a trans woman because it's like there's kind of like that glamour that comes with like trans women specifically. So I'm not a trans woman, and I'm dark-skinned Black person. Like in Montreal, the amount of lineups that is white passing all through and through, all the time, and that it's like DJs that get booked all the time. And yet, like, I've made a name for myself in this city, I know, and I don't get a lot of those bookings. Those people know me. They smile in my face, but I don't get those bookings for XYZ reason. But then they have those disclaimers in their parties. No racism, transphobia, all of that will be tolerated.
Yeah.
It's like you are tolerating it and enacting it in
You're
organizing
enabling
your event. So for me, it's so, like, appalling to... Like, it's very triggering to see, like, those words being thrown around in the inaction of those things happening simultaneously. So it's not even a Google situation. They know, like, they've seen those people. It's very easily accessible. Some people get booked, like, 5 times a month, and some other ones, like me, like, this summer, for 2 months before, I was like, hey, I can be, like, I'm available for bookings. Like, I was not booked from May to July. Mind you, I'm known in this city, and there's parties around, but it's like I'm not the palatable, whatever they're looking for. And like I said, most lineups is giving white people, white passing people, and I'm like looking around and there's like 3 dark-skinned Black people when it's like, this city's diverse enough that there's more than 3 Black people. So yeah.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
Because like thank you for sharing what you said. Your feelings are absolutely valid in what you're saying, because it's crazy how I feel like in Montreal, we have to create our own grassroots projects. And until, like, let's say Moonshine, until they got their 42nd one, they're like, oh, let's talk about it on Radio-Canada. But you're like, Moonshine's been there for so many years, for example, and it's like people of color and everything. But when it comes to even like in design, like they always, I feel like we're a bingo card where it's like we got one Asian, we got one black person, maybe let's get a migrant person, and like sure, okay, we got all the ticks in, and then they get their quotas, and I feel like are we being used as tokens, or are we really being seen as humans? And I feel like that's kind of annoying, because even like in design is just like who's leading all these big ad agencies? White cis het people, or white cis het men mostly. And even in like you'd go in design events or art events, look at the crowd, like where are we, you know? Or who's leading these crowds, or who's headlining these art galleries? They're all like palatable white people, or lighter people, or just like you were saying, the 3 same black people, or the same, unfortunately me too, like maybe am I in the same few Asian people in arts, but you're like, there's so many people to discover, and I'm like, why is it for us to give you the knowledge we've been Googling, let's say, or Instagramming, let's say, when you could do the same? I feel like there's this bridge where
it's also this conversation that doesn't want to be had, where it's like diversity and inclusion becomes this umbrella of like, we did the diversity and inclusion, but it's like, yeah, but there are other conversations to be had about that.
It's missing the education.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
It's missing like deconstructing
Also,
the
I
ignorance.
say I met 3 people in the crowd, so not even on the lineup.
Exactly. It's like
In the
where,
fucking crowd.
yeah.
Like,
Can I expose your identity to the viewers? Really
Yes.
quick?
Yeah, they
Okay. This is Lou, everyone. This is La Femme, and this is who I was talking about when I was talking about pillars in their community.
Period.
This is who it is. Thank you for speaking like real shit.
There'll be a like moment to talk at the end, like, and I want to hear from everyone, but just gonna keep on moving forward. And maybe Hakeem, because there is this conversation that we're having at the SAD about like just diversity and inclusion, and like, what do you think are the blind spots of like, you know, let's say from the because it's like, I find a thing in institutions, it's like, you know, from the outside you're seeing it as the institution, but then when you're inside, it's like, it's actually people with their biases that are kind of trying to do their best also with like the information and what they have, but it's kind of like, it's like, I don't know, you know, what are the blind spots that you've seen from just trying to bring more diversity and inclusion, but then it's like the reality of like the field?
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, it's institutional more than anything too, and I mean, this may be controversial, not a lot of people will agree with me, but I've kind of, to me, the more important role, more so than putting people of different, you know, whatever groups count the diversity, because that also, just that term is subject to current political agendas. Like, FYI, queer people don't count anymore in terms of funding. They're not part of a special diverse group anymore. So, you know, just laying down that. But like, instead of putting those people as like kind of like band-aids on like bigger wounds, like I think the more important, like, or not equally important, maybe a little bit more, is to change the blood of an institution as well, where it's like, you know, of course, if you have like an entire like white board of directors, it's going to be hard to make decisions that are not in the interest of a white board of directors. And I think that like giving a place in the behind the scenes and like the production side of things and like more stable positions, where it's not like, I'm gonna give you $300 once a year and then I'll say I've done my part, and actually have people in places of power that can like bring change systematically as well, and you can work together instead of just like using people as trophies and tokens, has a bit more importance to me personally than just, you know, like being like super representative, and then I'm like, yay, I've done my thing, and then it's kind of like ultimately it doesn't move as much air. You know, it's cool for, you know, artists that see themselves and like see their communities represented, and I'm not,
Because of course
you know,
representation is
yeah.
really important, like
Yeah.
let's say from growing up
Representation
and
matters.
not seeing any people of color on like Québécois TV or whatever, and just being like, so there is like an importance in representation, which
Yeah.
I think is like the first step of like this thing, but it's
Yeah.
like it
But
needs
it
to,
shouldn't
the
stop
script
there.
needs to
Yeah.
advance, yeah.
It's just like you need people in positions of power that can make decisions that are also like really gonna shift things around and bring about like a really different like cultural setting. So
Is there any kind of misconceptions that you guys would want to bring up in terms of just like, you know, perceptions on like institutions versus maybe, you know, how artists kind of like just from an artist side versus like institution side, like something that y'all have been just encountering like right now in y'all's careers?
Me, it's funny how people think because we're like over posting on social media that we're busy, but actually it's like I'm posting because I have time and I'm looking for work. I feel like
Real.
I feel like there's this weird parasocial feeling of absolutely comparing ourselves to our peers. When you're like, because I mean, yeah, it's for sure you as musicians, when you see someone gets overbooked, you're like, y'all, you working, and you kind of do get that sense that they're overworking and stuff, and you're just like, no, it's just, it looks like X, but it feels like X, and then we have to try and like dissociate this, again, parasocial life that we have online, because it's not because I'm posting a lot of shit, it's just because it's like old work that's been on standby,
Yeah.
that's not even out yet, that's been waiting on the line. I just feel like I just feel like as an artist, I don't know, visual artist, because I really depend on Instagram in this
For
sense,
sure.
rather than, I don't know, for y'all, for like maybe like SoundCloud or like Spotify and releases and stuff.
Mhm.
But like for me, it's just like people need to like, okay, your real life is not your social life. We are
Yeah.
two different people.
Agreed.
This is like, my Instagram is business
Mhm.
and memes, but mostly memes.
So in terms of like what would need to change, like what do you guys think about this? Just this phenomenon of like lack of transparency between artists and institutions. Like every time I'm having talks with like other DJs or artists, you know, people are just like, there's just this huge disconnection of, and then also talking from people that work in institutions. You know, they're like, this person's gonna cancel me on Instagram because I like forgot to send the money from the invoice. But it's just like, you know, there's just always
Why
these
did
kind
you?
of, no, exactly, why did you? Like, or then also from the artist side, like being like, why aren't these people pitching me like this? I want this amount of money because it's like this institution. Yeah, what do you guys think could help this like lack of transparency and like, you know, just like make it how can I say, just an ecosystem instead of just like, I feel like things are just so isolated and people don't really communicate about like these things.
Well, I'm just gonna go back really quick to the misconception question. I feel like, especially for musicians, for DJs specifically, there has been in the last few years a real parasocial element to someone's success and someone's like booking rate, and it feels like we have to make so much of our image and who we are something that's valuable or something that's I guess of value to get booked. And I think that although like, hey, I'm also very guilty of that, I'm aware of it and I know that I have to play it up a little bit. I feel like that should really change. I want that to change because it feels so, like the limits get too blurred, and then you base a lot of who you are on what you're getting, and then at one point you're sitting there and you're like, am I not serving enough? Is that
But then
why
it's
I'm
hard to
getting
not take that personally. Also,
Yeah.
as an artist, you know, you're just
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
oh, I heard y'all paid this person this amount, and
This
I'm getting
much,
this.
yeah.
So it's like, yeah, sometimes it's also hard as an artist to not take that relationship seriously, you know, like for me, I've just really had to like compartmentalize a little bit, like how, you know, there's things in the personal sphere and there's things in the professional sphere, and I need to separate these things because otherwise situations just get way too triggering. Sometimes people are being straight up disrespectful, like, you know, and I know that they wouldn't treat someone else that way, but, you know, for some reason they forgot to send the payment for my payment, like, you know, and like, yeah, so these kind of situations, I feel that there needs to be also space, like curiosity from the side of institutions, and then also like wanting to have dialogues, like, which is like something that I've been changing a bit, where I'm just like, if I'm not okay with like a situation or like a term or like a contract, like I'm just like, I'm receiving a contract, but I am allowed to negotiate it and to like be curious about like, you know, wanting to change this and that, you know, like as an artist, like I feel like there's also this kind of like advocacy for yourself, like that you're just kind of like, well, you kind of also have to be like, I want to have a conversation about this, like seriously, like, and let's have it kind of like push that on whoever is booking you or like whatever institution like wants to like develop a relationship with you.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And even when it comes to events for me, like through my experience as a DJ and then going into organizing, that's made me so much more aware and really specific about who I'm working with, because some clubs, you know, they won't admit it to your face, but they care about the bottom line. So if you're hosting a queer event and you're making sure to be very clear about the no respect or no space for discrimination of any kind, if a bunch of drunk white men want to walk and pay door, they will. And they will be let in. And they will change the entire energy of your show. And you cannot say anything about that, because at the end of the day, you're getting the money to pay these artists through this club.
Yeah, it's kind of this thing of, how can I say, like you're being the push and pull between business and political and identity and whatever, that is just like, yeah, it's kind of this whole tornado of things that are happening. And let's say not all bars that want to have queer events or whatever, they're not necessarily ready to be like, we're gonna kick out like this group of like 5 white guys that are being crazy and like scaring people. Like.
And then let's say that you don't want to host your event at a club or a bar or anything that's like that kind of accessible institution. Let's say you want to host an underground event. Those venues have the inflation's hit, like. I'm sorry.
Also ran by questionable people a lot of times.
Yes, very questionable. And then you, who are already like working on a tight budget, let's say.
By tight budget, you mean they want to keep all the money?
Yeah, and then you fall upon a venue that you know has hosted so many parties in the past, and now you hear the rental fees in the 3-4Ks. And one, you start to realize how much money other peers are spending on these venues.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, you're like, well, you have to choose. You have to make your little sacrifice. Either you host your underground venue or you DIY it and reimagine what a space can be. And you reimagine what your event can be and just the entire context of it. These are kind of your 3 options.
And what are you guys' like joys in, you know, like, how can I say, like, what maybe like pushes you guys to like do these things of, you know, creating these kind of spaces, like even, you know, Hakeem, like, the changes are slow to be done at the set, like there's still like changes that are being done that, like, you know, let's say from 5 years ago, the programming, it's just like very different than how it was. Yeah, if you guys could just speak a little bit about that, like just what are the kind of like, how can I say, like why do you guys do these things, you know?
Well, for that, like in my professional sense, like yeah, as of 5 years ago, like before it was just like the big players that could book there, like Venco, Spectra, Blue Sky Stern Black, yada yada yada. And I'm happy that now we do like house bookings and we can kind of pick like more people and we can choose from like really like underground like DJs or live acts. And also, I think I have to disclaim this. I mostly do live music itself. I don't do DJs much anymore. Because being a live musician and also like I'm just really passionate by live music, that's what I decided to prioritize in my job, or multiple people booking. Yeah, that's why I keep doing it, and that's also why I started like a new event collective to be able to push it even further, to just like kind of either get to see the music that I've always wanted to see, which hasn't been around for quite a long time, or B, inspire people to want to also do it, because that's how I started like doing live music, just because I attended a couple of shows and they really changed me. So it's kind of like the classic corny narrative, right? But like at the end of the day, that's also like the kind of thing that I want to transmit. Yeah, exactly.
For me, it's like the people, very much so, like my friends, my community, especially with Afterwear, seeing how many people that I know outside and like sometimes very close, like very personally, to be able to showcase them and like pay them my respects that way matters a lot to me. And then having people that I like, complete strangers, know, I don't even care if they know who I am. If they know Afterwear, I get like so giddy because I'm like, this is my little baby that started in my room, and it can represent something that's so much bigger than myself. And that's what I pursue with like everything. Even if I stop making, or DJing, if I stop making music, I would keep that.
Sweet.
For me, basically, it's like I'm doing things for healing my inner child. You know, you're talking about when we were growing up, we didn't see a lot of people of color when we were on TV, when we were watching TV. Well, Keb TV mostly.
Keb culture.
Keb culture
like
in general.
Museum, on stage, TV,
all of
everything.
it, and you're just like, everything you were watching on TV or listening on radio or just ads in general, you're like, where was I? Where was I, the Asian person, the black person? And already here, for them, they think putting a black person, they solved racism or whatever.
But we're also not talking about a black person with like a Quebecois accent, you know, we're talking about like an immigrant like person, like, you know, the real representative.
Stereotypical stuff, like back in the days, like I've been watching a lot of old Keb TV shows, and you're just like, there's a lot of like, again, stereotypical shit, and you're just like, well, even nowadays with Fabienne Larouche, let's say, who's taking over all the TV shows, it's like, again, I remember Abba and Preach were saying, don't try and wait for them to create things that you will see yourself in. Create those things that you want to see yourself in, because that's how, let's say, Abba and Preach managed to get their big like popularity. Or people like, again, I'm referencing to Moonshine, but there's so many other like beautiful musical grassroots things that are being made, or even art things that are being made where we're like, I don't see myself in it, well, I'll create them. Or when I was a kid, I wish I had that for me. And now even doing murals, I feel like the consequences and all the pressure it takes to make a mural, to stay outside dealing with hecklers and people who are just like fucking annoying. I feel like at the end of the day, when I see one Asian kid or one person or one kid of color that comes to me and says, wow, like they can see themselves, I feel like that's what's healing the next generation.
For sure.
To visualize yourself, to visualize as a person of color, a queer person, again, like trans woman, anything that's outside of the white cishet male domination, you create a new pathway to healing for the next generation and yourself. This is basically circular therapy, kind of.
Yes, and also I feel that this energy, like sometimes from like white cis het men spaces, will take it as very aggressive, they are very pushing back, but it's like, it's not about canceling white men, it's about making spaces for other narratives and like just being representative of reality, like, you know, and like that's just something that's just always, I find kind of fascinating, just the pushback and the kind of like reactions of just like aversion or like not wanting, where just like, there is this thing of also not wanting to let go of power and of decision making.
It's fragility.
It's fragility, exactly. But then it's like, I don't know, it's like eating food. Like, it's just like you want to eat different kinds of food. Like,
yeah, but at the same time, it's like learn to share the space. People keep asking, why do you keep saying this is cultural appropriation? We're just trying to tell you to not westernize something that you've been bullying us for. Stop trying to create a narrative that you're the victim in a world where white supremacy is still led by. We're still living in neo-colonialism constantly. Like, who is still on top? We've been saying, all of us, who's been on top, who's choosing the money and the grants, is people who are white. And who will they choose? Well, they'll choose people who look like them. It's really unfortunate that we have to like still discuss and make panels about this, but if we still have to, then that means it's still not taken care of. So whatever that's going on with X or Y's fragility, that does not concern us. Your fragility does not concern us. Your fragility is for you to like work and educate yourself on. We can't take more of the pressures of already, like I said, getting bullied as a kid about our food. Like, let's say, like, you're half Cambodian, I'm sure, like, yes, like,
such awkward lunches.
yeah, we got
I'm
bullied.
like, I wish I had like a ham sandwich.
Yeah, exactly. And your mom or your dad would just like, you know, make fried rice or just like nice noodles, and then you see 20 years later, your bullies are like, oh my god, kawaii. I love these
Opening
like
a third wave
fucking.
restaurant.
Yeah, oh my god. Like,
Fusion.
I love this like new Asian thing that's happening because everybody's liking it. And it's just like, we're not asking you to like not appreciate your culture. We're just asking you to acknowledge the culture that you've like bullied on. Like, you know, like DJs, I feel like white palatable DJs taking over all the aesthetics of like all you people that create such good fucking playlists. Every night the vibe is set because of people who are influential and inspiring like y'all. Like I said,
like recognizing the real purveyors of this culture that they popularize.
Yeah, don't be a culture vulture. Just like we need to knit together a sense of space that becomes a blanket of safety, not rather than ripping it away. Like I said, it's okay to also credit where your things are from. Where did you
And it's okay, to feel awkward, to feel like, you know, you don't have all the information, to be curious. Like, I feel like sometimes that's also the fear that people have, where they're like, you know, they want to look like they know or whatever. And it's just like, it's fine to just be curious and to just be like, oh, I didn't know that. And like,
that's the joy.
Change your perspective.
That's the joy of curiosity. I don't see how the joy of curiosity it's not ignorance. It's just you don't know. That's okay. I mean, we're not all smart and we're not all dumb. And that's okay.
Wise ending on these questions. Cool. So that was kind of it for my questions. Was there anything else that you guys wanted to bring up?
I think because you know, like, what's the thesis of the panel? I think it was fiscal responsibility.
Just financial literacy, and just in terms of like addressing that topic.
Yeah. So, and there was this question about the difference in approaching an institution and an institution approaching artists. Mm-hmm. I think because you know, like I also had like a lot of really harsh preconceived ideas before working in it, and I think that like now I'm 1 foot in, 1 foot out, but I think that like talking to institutions as an artist, there's this like unfair dynamic, right, where it's like I like a venue or a club or a booker will expect some degree of professionalism from an artist that sometimes is forgotten when people start out and they haven't like had a lot of big quotes proper booking experiences, where you know you also have a certain degree of responsibility as an artist to like provide the right information, like you should provide banking or like ways of being paid and stuff like that before like blowing up and being like, why haven't you paid me? It's like, yeah, but you sent no invoice. Like, how can I like, you know, pay you? But it happens so often.
Yeah.
And it's also like a thing that was like, you know, from playing DIY for a long time in bands and in rock bands before. I would expected people to do like they would I don't know, like basketball bien like back in the day where it's like, oh yeah, okay, here's your $40 like at the end of the night. Instead of like immediate kind of thing where it's like sometimes like the further up you go in kind of like the professional industry, there's like differences that you need to learn. And that you know, for transparency as well, it's like now what I do personally is I have like this little document that I hand artists as well as to how to prepare to interact with like the institution, the kind of documents and demands and like expectations that we have, and to give you time, like the time to read them over and like agree or not to them. And you were talking about contracts as well. It's like that's also a thing that you need to remind yourself is that you're allowed to do that.
Yeah.
You know, like a contract is not a finality, it's a proposition, right? It's the same for a booking offer. You're totally allowed to like negotiate, and it goes both ways. So, yeah.
All right, well, yes? Had a little...
One tip that I do want to give is that depending, like regardless of if you're getting booked a lot or not getting booked, my outlook has changed recently where it's not really about the amount of bookings that I get, it's the type of booking that I get. Because yes, although I do agree that you need to have a certain amount of credential to do certain things, even when it comes to booking people for our events, like if it's at a club that's going to host people, I would at least want to be sure that you know how to use a CDJ.
Yeah. Very real, like...
You know, at least.
Some TikTokers, TikTok
Hey, no
DJs.
comment, no comment. But I would at least want you to know how to navigate that, because it's not my responsibility to give you a crash course before that. I think the solution for that is to have all of the DJs that have played for a minute or know the lay of the land to host more workshops for people who are interested in starting out, and not make them free and not make them make them free and make them very accessible to people, so that it's not about your selection of sounds or to think that the only way to book certain gigs or a certain amount of gigs is to play a very specific sound. There is an openness to the way you want to express yourself. And again, bringing back to the survival element, accepting a few low-paying gigs, fund them towards something bigger. Fund them towards something that will fuel you more, that's not about other people.
Yeah, the bigger picture. Really.
Yeah, exactly. And that's like kind of like I've been like struggling with that just like through my like career of just being like, you know, DJing, making art, like doing stuff like that. It's like fun, you know, even like working at a venue, like, you know, there are these spaces of like fun, and sometimes, yeah, it's hard to see like, okay, when is it serious? Like, you know, or like, when do I need to kind of like, yeah, keep an eye on like my end goal and kind of like, hey, I need to be like cranking, you know, like the heat a little bit to just myself get tight on like certain things that, you know, it's like, if I'm a complete mess, like, you know, doing emails or like whatever, like, you know. So that would be my final question, is what do you guys think you need to change in yourself? Like, you know, because I feel like in these relationships, there's a lot like, you see the institution and then, or you see yourself as an artist, like as a small thing against the institution. But then, like I said, sometimes I'm like, I need to, you know, stop getting late to gigs. Like I need to, you know, yeah, if I sent my invoice like a week late, like I can't expect it to come like, you know, it's like earlier. Some businesses, it's only going to be processed in, you know, so it's kind of like, also there's this like introspection that I feel is needed, like when you're in arts, just like in terms of keeping your integrity, like, you know, keeping the bigger picture in your vision. So yeah, what do you guys think you have to change in maybe y'all's you know, careers?
I feel like as artists, we're really hard on ourselves, as we all are, and we all know, because that's the human behavior we have. But
It's also an extension of yourself, like making
yeah,
art.
but it also comes with like that weight of the trauma and your journey and where you come from and everything, and that's all valid. And I don't think if like you were saying, I do my invoices late all the time. I hate it. I fucking hate it. But I know that I know that that's again my ADHD that plays into it, and I have a lot of like issues also with my mental health, and you have to be able to accept that you won't fit in that 9 to 5. You won't fit in what the society norms are. So know and find your middle ground of like, sorry, that's like the other question, but like I'll come back to the end of the new question, but like find a middle ground. I work best at 11 p.m. to 3 a.m.
Yeah.
And I know
your
that's
own schedule is really important. I
yeah, don't force yourself in a schedule you don't know. Or if you want to do 6 invoices at the same time and you know that you're going to be late, learn how to budget to be sure that you will be okay for the next 6 weeks, you know? Just be aware of your limits and be aware of what you are. So like if I would change myself, I would just want to say I need to be kinder to myself, I think. But
that's real too.
that's impossible for me for now. Like my self-esteem is poo-poo. But the rest, I mean, you kind of just, oh,
Sorry. Apologies.
cancelled. No, but like, cutting off a woman?
Hakeem was like, stop.
Fucking patriarchy! No, but like, to be honest, like, if I were to change or work on myself, like, again, like, we have to just be kind and be more like thoughtful of oneself. And
Because it's hard
It's
also
too
to
hard.
be like in this business of like making art and like putting yourself out there and dealing with these misconceptions and
yeah.
the social relationships too are really intense, like being friends and working with people. Like sometimes the lines get blurry, there are beefs, like
Yeah, but at the same time, be as true and genuine as you are. Let's say like what is happening right now with Palestine, with the world that's getting bombed. It's just be true to yourself and don't be shy away from people who don't have the same values as you. It's okay to let go of things that are not fitting with your values. So just, I guess the only thing to change is to just constantly be as more true to myself positively, I guess.
how about you guys? Nothing to work on?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm perfect. Well, these were more personal for me, but I haven't learned everything that I want or need to learn yet. So even right now that I'm thinking of transforming my sets into more hybridized and adding more live performance, because I'm working on my own music now, learning how to not only use equipment or like experiment with new equipment, but also to be able to verbalize that and actually promote myself the right way that I can achieve performances that are directly in line with what I'm thinking about and what I want. That's something that I want to learn and keep exploring and keep meeting more like-minded people and like acquire knowledge that way.
I love that.
And for me, I'd say in one sentence is to stop being a fucking coward.
Real.
Where I just, well, I think it's really illustrated well where I've never really committed to doing freelance. And I
Well,
think
it's scary and precarious, like
yeah, but I think
you know?
And I as I grow, within my practice, and I meet a lot of people who I befriend, and they're proper freelancers, I grow envious of them, in a healthy way. But I'm just like, I should do that myself, but it's just a question of doing it,
Yeah, because
So-
you have to commit. If you're doing it, it's like just
Yeah.
the whole, like
And
you're also your own company, like
yeah,
type
exactly.
of thing as a
So
freelancer.
it's just like not being half-assed all the time, and I think that's, for artistically speaking, that's what I would have to work on.
But don't be too hard on yourself.
I don't know,
Yeah,
fuck
you
that.
can bring all your institutional knowledge into your own career.
Yeah, if
Yeah.
your freelancing
Also,
doesn't
yeah.
work, it's fine.
No, but like that's another thing too, like seeing yourself whole, like which is like what you were talking about a little bit, where like me being in different spaces, I'm just like, oh, I actually have the skills to do these things. I'm just like putting myself in this box of I'm like, I'm a D, like, you know what I mean? Just like, just being so hard in terms of like the pressure that I'm putting on myself sometimes. And there are some people that are just like no thoughts, just like doing the stuff and like, you know, and I'm just like, wow, like more of that for, you know, people that are working hard already.
Some people
Just
are
find balance.
some people are just incredibly savvy about that stuff. Whether it's about like the bureaucracy of it all or the like.
But then it's
of
also giving Nepo babies a lot of times, you know? Like, I don't want to be that person, but especially in Quebec, I'm like, you know, I have a lot of friends that have famous painter parents, famous, you know, and it's like, there's that reality too of like, the Quebec art system is really specific, and like families that have been operating like in that, you know, receiving grants system, like they know how to do an invoice and like how to set up a structure on how to, you know, be a freelance artist person. Like, so there's also like not comparing ourselves, like, you know, which
because we can still fucking do it.
Yeah.
Like, we might not be like a beautiful, generational, wealthy family for years on, but like at the same time, who needs castles when we have a 3.5 in a whatever neighborhood in Montreal, right? No, but to be honest, like, that's the power of community. Like, we have to do the underground railroads of what is the new community that's building on top of it. We, like, don't be scared to ask someone how much you're getting paid. Don't be scared to ask someone, how do you do this? Like, we need to stop gatekeeping. I feel like we grew up always like, you know, hiding our answers, you know, in schools, and you're just like, nah, man, like, just cheat.
And a lot of the time, like, you're asking a question to someone, and like anytime I ask a question to someone, they're like glad to tell me, you know, and I'm always like, I don't know why I was just like pretending, like, you know, putting all this pressure on myself that I suck for not knowing how to do this, where I could just ask my friend or like someone that I see that is good at doing that.
Yeah, and if you think you're stupid, it's okay. Maybe someone else is stupid. Together, you'll be less stupid together. Exactly. Like, that's the power of just being together. Like, 2 negatives makes a positive, you know? I think. Is it? Yeah.
I agree.
Okay.
Yeah!
But only in the multiplication and division.
Oh, dang. But anyways, math are maths and school is cool, but community is community, so that's different.
Okay, now the mic drop would have been nice.
Yeah, I know
Baby mic drop.
Did you have a last thing to say, Hakeem?
I think on the gatekeeping thing, honestly, because I was always perceiving gatekeeping as being more real, like Odile said also, where it's like, just ask. Like, people are so glad to help, and if you meet someone who's really resistant to it, like gatekeeper, you can accuse them of skill issue, because it's like a DJ that doesn't want to share tracks. Well, it's because they're not confident they can dig enough, you know. So
Anyways,
it's kind
we
of
got
like,
Shazam
if you
now.
can't renew yourself and reinvent and like push your practice further than the people you're trying to help up with you, then skill issue. That's all I have to say.
Period.
Projection.
But yeah, projection, and also not kind of taking things personally sometimes, you know.
Yeah, that's okay.
This brings us to the end of our panel. Thank y'all for being here.
Thank you for being here, guys.
Did people have any questions?
Oh,
Yes.
Bring the microphone.
I have a question for you.
You where?
You.
Yeah, you.
You me?
Maybe.
Maybe.
Oh, hi. Sorry, I don't see anything. There's no more lights.
I'm like a musician and DJ, and I work in like music and nightlife, live performance and stuff. My little sister is, she's 19, she's in college. She's a super talented muralist and painter. Actually, you guys have a very similar name. Her name is Maylee.
Hi, girl.
So I'm trying to convince her because she's so talented and she works so hard. And she's already done like so many like murals. She's done like city high schools, like outdoor public spaces, before even 20, you know. She doesn't make more money than me, I think. But I'm trying to tell her now, you need to start like thinking about like setting boundaries, like working on your mental health, working on other things that are gonna propel your career further and allow you to have more opportunities. And like, for the first time I sat her down and I was like, calculate how much you got paid per hour. Do you know how much you're making per hour doing these murals? You're working 90 hours a week. Like, just to finish, because, you know, she's just... Anyway, so I wanted to ask, since she's not here, if you would have any advice for someone in that position, how to establish this balance and push themselves further on like, I guess like learning the business side or outside of just the creative
Well,
side.
first of all, follow your dreams, but also follow your limits, because
Yeah.
I feel like we try to over diversify ourselves and over diversify our time, but don't forget, in one day you have 24 hours, and in that 24 hours you have to find a time to sleep and rest, and that's absolutely important to like centralizing yourself. So I feel like because your sister is young, she probably wants all the opportunities to be sure that she makes it. But like, you will find other opportunities even if you cancel one or two. Do not feel like the weight of the world is gonna end because you're canceling a gig. You have to learn how to be able to not die before 25, let's say, or just be able to be like, if you're gonna work in a tired body, then you won't have enough to keep continuing to do what you love. So I think try and be fair on like, do you really need this gig that's underpaid or overpaid, or I
Do
don't
you need to put that much time into this?
yeah, like, is it seriously at this point, if as a 10-year older as your sister would say, I would just tell her like, is it necessary? Start with the basic. Is it necessary? Is it necessary to take this gig? Is it necessary to take another gig over this other gig? Is it necessary to deal with, let's say, a client that is not very responsive or communicative or doesn't want to comply to the ideas you're giving? You have to be sure that if it's necessary for you, then it's worth it. And if it's not, it's okay to say no. Tell her it's okay to say no as early as possible, please.
But there's also this other aspect of like, because I've been speaking to people that are either photographers or videographer, like things that are more quantifiable. And you know, they're like, I'm charging for my Premiere, I'm charging for my computer like licensing, like, you know, just being on the computer for X amount of time. So there's also like breaking apart the work that you're doing and being like, how much an hour should that labor be, like, you know?
Yeah, but I think it comes to also like when we're talking about survivalism, it's also like find a base where you're like, am I satisfied with what will I get paid for with the hours I'm committing with? Because let's say, I know, like I said, I mentioned it all the times, my ADHD is my factor why I can work like 4 hours instead of 8 hours, let's say, depending the project, yes sir. But like, if I know that I can do this in X amount of time, then I can also say I want to pay you more for doing less. But it's all relative to yourself. Do not try and compare what I do to what he does or what they do, or what, like, do not try and quantify yourself towards other people. Quantify to what your limits are, because you only know yourself. She only knows herself. What you do, even if you're siblings, that doesn't mean you wake up the same way every day. So why is the work being compared by being, because I feel like I got pushed away from jobs because I was doing it in such a fast amount of time, and then they're like, oh, they see me slack, so I'm doing nothing. But it's just, no, maybe I'm just too competent for the job, you know? So don't take everything as a negative. Just see it as your own limits, and then as your own, like, again, strengths and power. And yeah, just don't try and overwork yourself. You're just starting. It's fine. It's okay. You're gonna find so many more opportunities. Like, you're just starting.
Okay, I have one small follow-up question.
Yeah.
Which is just, do you have like a document where you kind of outline your own limitations and needs as, like, for example, in the context of muraling, like when someone comes to you with a job opportunity, do you present them with a document being like, okay, like, I don't know, like, I'm thinking of like, how can she take into account like the hours of work, what she's doing, the protective equipment she needs to buy, the cost of, you know what I mean? Do you
I
keep
think
track of all of that so you can present it when you have a booking?
I think you just kind of set with, because you have to start somewhere, right? So I don't know how much time you took to start practicing your DJ, but I'm sure it takes less time now than before, because you get it now. And I think it's the same thing for, like, for me. I worked enough to say, after 4 murals, I know it takes 4 days rather than a week for this amount of time and amount of space. So you kind of learn with the time, and you like, I think it's a gut feeling also. Trust what you think. If you think it takes less, just add 2 more days, let's say. If you think it'll take more, then just say, hey, sorry client, it's gonna take more. Don't feel bad about asking more, but don't feel bad about like, because you think, oh, it's gonna take less days. Like, don't underestimate yourself too, because don't forget limits. Don't forget it rains. Don't forget it gets cold. Like, see, like just these little giggles prove that people forget that life rains, you know? So that's the little things where you just also have to like take in consideration. Just don't forget about things that are unexpected. I feel like we want to control the world, but the world ain't going on your own pace. You have to be sure of just in case. And that's where my OCD kicks in. So that's where you're just like, just be aware of just everything that's just like around you, that might be against you too. So yeah, gut feeling.
I know the question was for Maylee, but I think a good advice also for the kind of thing where it's like, you know, like buying the equipment and stuff like that, like where you put your limits, which should you consider. A good exercise for your sister might be to try to apply for a grant, even without submitting it. But it gives you a pretty clear outline of what, because you're responsible for building a budget, perhaps for an entire team, what kind of expenses come with them, right? So it's like, oh, I have to consider per diem, which is like allocations, then food and that and this and like labor and equipment and the kind of equipment you can charge. So like the reverse procedure of like trying to build a budget yourself or a grant request really helps with the kind of thing you should keep in mind whenever you're dealing with an employer, right?
And some grants have like really clear like outlines, like let's say it's for a project or whatever, they'll be like, we need this and that, so you kind of have a clear image of like what is requested.
Yeah, or just ask the people for the receipts and just tally them together. Like, see what you think. Because my psychologist would tell me to just say to just write what I'm thinking. Because we always think, and we don't really make it tangible. So seeing the things that we might think that might be huge actually are just tiny. So you're just like, oh, but I think it's gonna take $6 million to get the paint. No, it's actually just like $200 and that's fine. So you see, just do exercises that make you feel comfortable, but for her to feel comfortable, I mean. But like you said, even you can do even more, and once you do like these like typical grant stuff, once it's done, put it again and again for the next grant.
You also have an idea of how much things cost.
Yeah.
Because sometimes when you're just receiving the offers, you're kind of just like, I guess, but
Yeah.
it's just like, well, how much does it cost to like throw a night and like book 3 DJs? Like, you know, like.
Yeah.
Did anybody have any questions about like maybe their personal things that they're dealing with, or
Thank you.
not so much?
For me, it's like a question, half like thoughts that I have about what y'all talked earlier about invoices and stuff like that. I feel like in the scene, I don't know if it's just a Montreal thing, but I think it's not just a Montreal thing.
Thank you.
Thank you, sorry.
I feel like DJs and artists, it's like they're not considered as real workers because it's like everyone has to pay rent. So why are you delaying the money to pay an artist at an indefinite like amount of time? Like no other job has money, they don't know when they're getting their pay. It's like everyone has rent the first of the month, and like most the job salarié, it's every 2 weeks, or even other jobs like if you have contracts, it's like stapled in the contract when you're getting paid. But then when it comes to DJing or like musicians and all of that, all of a sudden it's like the organization is making you wait, and they're like, oh, just be patient. You're, like as if it's like you don't need that money, but it's like I also have rent and stuff to pay, and I'm even more precarious than those other workers.
For sure.
Yeah.
And it's like, yes, there is a part of like sometimes it's like the artist didn't send the invoice, but often the artist, like I send all my invoices and yet I'm still waiting on pays, like it'll take a month, but it's like, why, like my work was like at that moment, so I'm calculating the money for that moment. Now you're delaying it, it's like I'm missing money for that moment of the month, and it goes all of a sudden to the next month. So like, yeah, I think there's like this thing of like, are we considered as, it's like, it's not a hobby. I feel like people think it's like a hobby, we're just playing our Spotify playlist or something.
Yeah, like
I'm
literally.
are you for real right now?
Yeah.
And so, and also I think like since COVID, I feel like it got worse in terms of professionalism on the part of organizations, where they always forget to mention a million details, forget to ask for the invoices, then they're gonna be like, we can't pay you because we don't have the invoice, but they forgot to ask you altogether. So it's like, and it's like, obviously you're not gonna send your invoice preemptively because it's not all the organizations that require it. So a lot of gigs, they don't need the invoice. So it's depending on the organization. All of those things really make it like, okay, there's a lack of professionalism, and then there's a lack of consideration for your artists. It should be priority to pay your artists before, I don't know what bureaucracy you're doing with your other things in your fucking thing, like pay the artists as soon as possible. We all have rent to pay, and being an artist is already precarious. We don't have any protections. Like we have like medical, all of that, it's all in our money that you are paying us, that we're underpaid already. So, yeah.
Since I'm a delegated institution here, I'll answer some of those in reverse order. Personally, I really appreciate preemptive invoices, and that's a practice that is super well accepted. And a little like technical detail that I see a lot of bigger artists that I learned on the fly because of it was that people also put payment échéancier, like
like paid by what I'm saying. That's
due
like
dates.
my first response. I'm like, how long is it gonna take you to process this?
And so that's like, and you know, like it's really shitty that you have to consider it. But you know, like at least I'm happy to say that the institution for which I work, we have the 2-week system, so you're getting paid what I'm getting paid. You know, it's like fair play.
But then there's these standards of like, let's say mural or whatever. They're like, it's a month. Like you didn't know.
No, that's
like,
fine. And I've played for a few festivals that it's like 3 months in. I'm like,
there are standards that are not communicated.
Yeah.
You know?
Like La Sat is very like governmental oriented. Like it's like one of the most like, I guess would be the most like regulated, but that's not the norm.
I guess maybe, but also I just thought about your third point. You know what about COVID and the pandemic? I think it's kind of because the huge generational gap that occurred with you know, the cultural field not being like sustainable financially for a lot of older like Gen X people that just like buzzed off when they saw that their whole like livelihood were threatened, so they went to other jobs. And so whoever inherited positions, like myself, I'll be the first to admit I've done a lot of mistakes. I've forgotten a lot of things over the years because I never had someone to show me, because I was like brought up from like nothing with no mentor, right? Because it's like that kind of cession that happened with like COVID, where everyone was like, if you're over 35, you're like, maybe I should reconsider making only like $25K a year and living super precariously just for the love of arts, because we just saw that it doesn't matter. Like according to governmental policies, right? So it was like that kind of thing where like there was this huge knowledge gap that also happened. And I feel like a lot of institutions that brought up like younger blood also kind of, you know, didn't frame or like train them properly. So
that's
you know, that's a weird thing that I kind of like learned also along the way, and the more people I meet, the more I find that it's true, that it's like, oh well, you're kind of like DIY but in a really professional setting, you know.
No, literally.
But not to take away from how shitty institutions are, because like I 100% agree.
It's not all of them. It's just it's a norm to kind of be like, oh, the pay of the artist is an optional
it's whatever
thing.
it's
like because in my invoices I have the due date and
but then also not being shy to follow up. I'm just like 1 week and I didn't hear anything after the gig. I'm just like, so like, you know, like straight up like copy paste from my previous message. How long is it going to take you guys to process it? Like, you know, 2 days no answer. I'm like, hey, how long is it going to take? Like, you know, because
I've been
but being on the other side, sometimes people are processing a lot. Like they're dealing with a lot of bookings or whatever. You know, it's like a festival. It's like they're doing all the bills at the end. Like it's like crazy, everybody. So it does happen that sometimes, the person forgot because like they are a human being and they're just like genre débordé and like, you
No,
know.
of course, and in my case, I remind them. In my case, I can't do an invoice if I don't have the address. So if they didn't send it to me, like I can't do the invoice because I have to address it to someone.
Yeah.
But it just sucks that they expect us to be 16 people in one, you know?
Yeah.
Like you have to be your accountant, you have to